Next, from the state capitol, we talk with Representative Fred Crespo, one of those who participated in crafting the spending bill that will fund state services through the end of December and elementary education for a full year. This runs about 7 minutes. Representative Fred Crespo, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel.
Thank you.
So after 18 months of waiting, we now have a spending bill that's been passed to at least keep the wheels from entirely coming off.
Right.
Can you give us, first of all, give us a little bit of the details of what the bill actually does?
Well, primarily, I was part of this work group that we've been meeting now for almost 4 weeks and laying the framework for the speaker and the leaders to decide what they're going to do. There's a couple of principles that we were following. Number one, we had to make sure that it was based on existing funds. So that was one of the premier things in this framework. Secondly, we need to come up with a budget for the entire year for education, K through 12, and then also make sure we had enough money to keep us at least operating through the end of the year for operations. There were some pressure points. Department of Corrections was a huge one for the governor as well for some members, so we need to make sure that we provided funds for that. Projects, road projects and bridges that needed to be repaired, that was a big pressure as well. So we provided money for that. So it gets us through the end of December. It's not a final product, but I'll tell you, I've been part of like at least 4 different work groups, and it's nice to know that at least one of them was able to get the job done.
Relative to the dollars, and you were saying what available funds, what is the top line? I wasn't sure. How much was just being spent there? Do you know?
We talked about, number one, education was a big one, was $7 billion. And keep in mind that this was a combination of GRF, general revenue funds. There were other state funds as well. And we also need to appropriate, give the government the authority to spend the federal dollars. So we're talking about billions and billions of dollars. It all depends how you break it down, but it was a big number.
And on some of the items, so as you say, the federal dollars, even those dollars might be sitting in an account, we couldn't spend them without having the legal authority of passing a bill, right?
Yeah.
So am I right that now road construction will be able to continue?
Correct.
And what about something like the LIHEAP program? Do they get their funds then?
The LIHEAP, that was taken care of even before this budget. It's something that we were able to, actually it's a bill that I introduced during the regular session, and we did fund that through the end of the year. So that was not part of this because it's already been taken care of.
But they'll get their federal funds when those come, like I think it's November, if I recall.
Correct. So they do have the authority to spend those funds for LIHEAP, and we also did appropriate the other state funds that we collect in the utility bills to pay for the LIHEAP program.
Try not to keep you too much more, but just a couple more details. Let's say on the MAP grants, we didn't have a 2016 spending. So does this fund the MAP grants in arrears? Where are we on that, since we're talking about both the fiscal year 2016, which ends today, and fiscal year 2017, which begins tomorrow? Tell us where are we on the MAP?
Just to give you some background, and the governor's introduced a stopgap proposal. They did not include money for MAP grants. So as part of the team that we put together, we did negotiate to put money for MAP, and we decided the best way to, there's limited resources, to spend that money was to make sure that we paid the colleges for 2016, make sure that they're made whole. As you all know, a lot of these colleges pretty much floated those MAP grants to the students, but we had heard that there were some colleges that were asking the students to pay them back. So we want to make sure we relieve that pressure, so they will be funded for 2016. We're going to come back in November, and we're going to have a discussion what to do in 2017.
And on the higher ed, K-12 is funded throughout the whole year. What about the higher ed? Is that a partial?
It's a partial. So they're getting funded. It all depends on the colleges, up to like 70 or 80% for the last 18 months.
Lastly, there's been so much contentiousness, which is why we've been at loggerheads for so long. You know, people. Is this a standalone, or does this portend that maybe we'll have better cooperation on a forward-going basis. Do you have any feel for how the working relationship was, and now that you have these working groups that you participated on?
Well, I can tell you this, Terry. I've been part of 4 different groups, and I'll tell you, behind closed doors, when we meet with the governor's office, it's a very cordial meetings. We have some of the right folks at these meetings. The speaker mentioned this in his closing today. This is the 7th time this year that we've been able to pass an appropriation bill. 6 times. There's one common denominator, and that is that there's no turnaround agendas tied to it. So I think we need to take a step back and consider that as we move forward, not to say that we cannot talk about the turnaround agenda items. I think we should meet and have those discussions, but some of those items, as I've told the governor's office, will require some time. If you remember, when we passed the pension reform bill several years ago, it took us 3 years to get to a point where we had a product that we can vote on. When we passed workman's comp reform several years back, it took us 2 years to get to that point. So some of the turnaround agenda items that the governor has been pushing for, I think we can sit down and have a conversation, but we need to look at history and realize that this is going to take a while. And I think that's where the biggest disconnect is. We're required to pass an annual budget, and I repeat, an annual budget every year, and if you tie that to an agenda that's going to require 2 or 3 years, it just doesn't reconcile very well. So I think we should have those discussions, but they should be independent and separate of the budget discussions.
All right, Representative, thank you.
Oh, great.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.